Is there something playing? All right, and we are live for Friday Night Fire. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another Friday Night Fire. And I've got here on my left, your right, Mr. Matt Koenig. I'm Mike Phillips, and we are going to get live and inspired. We do this for motivation, inspiration, our faith-based foundation. That's what we're looking at, is scripture and from the Bible, and a whole lot of conversation with Matt and I for the next hour. So I'm going to dive over here to the chat, and we're going to get things going. So we've got a really good show lined up, and I think Matt and I were just starting to talk as we were warming up for the show. One of the things, let me share the dynamic with you for a second here. For the people that are watching this show, know that Matt and I have some limited conversation. Hey, what's the idea? What's the 20,000 foot view? And then we don't talk again about this. So yeah, we're as surprised as you are when we start having a show. It's fantastic.
Makes it more fun, so we don't, because otherwise it's like if we talked about it all and we had it lined out, it'd feel kind of scripty.
It would. And so I think one of the advantages, and Matt and I, our beliefs certainly align, and hopefully our beliefs align with many of the people that are tuning in and watching this with us each Friday night. And what I would ask you is, if you are not already a subscriber, please make sure you subscribe to one or both of our YouTube channels. Make sure that you tune in with us on the Facebook pages. We broadcast this to each of those places, and Periscope and Twitch, and you name it, we're there. So that's a little bit of a long intro tonight, but here we are. Matt, how you doing this week, man?
Intro. And I am so great, Mike. It has been a really cool week. How's your week been, dude?
It has been, it's been busy for sure. It's been really busy. I want to point out that she's going places.
Yes, I am at my wife's desk over here. These are clothes for the women who are clients of Changing Your Conversation. They help hook them up with like a good outfit to interview in, stuff like that, and nice shoes and things. That's why you see all those boxes. So this is her corner of the office, because I, in my infinite wisdom, said, hey, I can sell my Mac Mini for basically as much as this new MacBook Air. And the new MacBook Air actually outperforms my 2019 like quad core i9 MacBook Pro that I had. I'm like, this is a no-brainer. I put my Mac Mini on Marketplace, sell it. I go on. I'm like, I'm just going to buy this MacBook Air, go in the Apple store and pick it up. And I go online and buy it, only to realize that you can't get it before December 2nd. So I have been writing my book from my iPad. I've been live streaming from my iPad. And thankfully, my wife is doing yoga right now. And she said I could borrow her MacBook Pro to do the show. If you were to see it, you would see also a pink desktop on her MacBook Pro and flowers on the keyboard.
It actually really brings out your eyes. It's nice.
I just feel I feel like I'm in touch with my sensitive side if I sit at her desk. So I think it makes me a better person.
I know both of our wives make us better people. So there's valuable wisdom in that. All right. So tonight, as we get into the show, for the folks tuning in, I popped this in my Discord channel, so I hope Neil's able to come back in and join us, because one of the ways that this conversation came about is last week at the very end of the show. A friend of mine, Neil, who is the UrbanExplorer on YouTube, I would say check him out if you're into that van life, because he does some really, really cool stuff. so he brought up, he said, hey, I want to ask a couple of guys, a couple of Christian guys, you guys are having a conversation on this show. What happens then when you die? What happens to your soul? What's your interpretation of the soul? And so there's so many different facets to the way this conversation could go. And even I think he brought up, he said, well, do you believe in ghosts? And what about purgatory? And so, Matt ventured down that side of the path.
I love it. Oh, it's so great.
And, I always do a little bit of research before the show to make sure kind of to keep my own beliefs in check, to keep my brain in check with like, okay, well, what else is out there and so forth. And I looked at a blog article that one of the writers brought up and said, hey, Joe Ingram, good evening, sir.
Joe Ingram, what's
in
up,
the house? So, and one of the things that came up in this blog article is, and like I knew it, but I didn't put it together. I didn't realize it. Every religion, like literally every religion, from Christianity, Judaism, Buddhism, Hinduism, it doesn't, all the various religions that are available in the world. Sounds like I'm selling something that are available in the world
waiting
today.
for you to say, I'm like, what? But wait, there's more.
Every one of them talks about the human having a soul, having, that there's something else. There's some piece of energy or spirit that is powering us, and depending on the belief system. So I thought that was interesting. Joe Ingram says, purgatory is a car dealership with no leads or foot traffic.
It does feel like that. For those of you that have never worked in the car business, agreed.
And then Swampy shows up. Swampy gave us a good, he was who we talked about last week when he said, hey, is God being sold for profit? And we had that conversation. Says, I had an out-of-body experience following an MVA. Hail you and evangelicals, I didn't see Trump.
I don't know. What's an MVA?
I don't know.
I'm gonna be honest with you, I don't know what that is.
So Swampy, can you spell that out for two guys that don't know what that is?
You don't understand the acronym? Man.
So where do you want to start with this conversation, Matt?
I think a good place to start, Mike, is kind of where our dialogue was going right before the show, and I think it's a good way to disclaimer this, because there are Christians out there that will. And when I say before the show, I mean what we were talking about with like people being willing to say I don't know, right?
Absolutely.
So I'm going to share a couple quick things as we roll into this. And first is this: it's okay to say I don't know. Like there's one thing that if you're a believer in Jesus and a follower of Jesus, and you genuinely desire to be a seeker of His truth, okay, you actually have some really big things in common with those who are non-believers yet. And that is, it is okay to say we don't know, because at the end of the day, we didn't talk to Jesus face to face, and we don't know a lot of things, right? There are a lot of blanks in, like a lot of areas of fill in the blank in the story. One beautiful thing, there's a series called The Chosen on YouTube. And the cool thing about this series is it focuses on what could the lives of the apostles been like if like Peter and Andrew, Simon and Andrew before it's called Peter, they were fishermen. What was the life of a fisherman living there like back then, right? Mm-hmm. So there are some things in the Bible that we go, well, we don't know what happened between here and here, and it's okay to say that. So there's a lot in common that believers and unbelievers have, which is we don't know. So everything we're reading in the Bible, we know there's a lot of accounts. So there's stuff that we can go, yeah, that's true, right? There are some of those things that are true. They're historically proven as well. Mm-hmm. But we have to be willing to say that sometimes people don't interpret things the same way. And just because they see it a little differently, it's not a salvific issue. It doesn't mean they're, saved or unsaved or things like that. So just know that just because we dig into the Bible and we do the research too, and we're passionately believing something, Mike and I reserve the right to be wrong and say, please don't hold it against us. And by the same token, we'll say, look, even if we disagree with a point of view you're making, please don't take it as we don't care about you or think less of you. It's just we might not agree with you on something. So absolutely. I just want to start with that and own the fact that we're not always going to get it right. And MVA is a motor vehicle accident, Swampy said.
Got it. So Swampy says, I had an out-of-body experience following a motor vehicle accident. And then, hey, all you
And he didn't
evangelicals,
see
I didn't see
Trump in it.
Trump. Yeah,
Listen,
and then
man, if I
the
have an
Trump
out-of-body
comment.
experience, the last thing I want to see is a politician as well. So
Yeah.
we can agree on that, bro.
So as Matt's saying that, part of the brief conversation, because we get together probably 5 minutes before, and we kind of talk about each other's weeks and so forth. And when we're talking about, I don't know, here's one of the differences, I think, between non-believers. They're saying, well, I don't believe because I don't know. And believers are saying, I have faith because I don't know. So,
you know what? That's a good way to say that.
So I think there's some of that overlap in that sort of ideology. So one of the things I wanted to address, because the path that I went down as we were talking, and I think this would lead to some good conversation here, when Neil was talking about, well, what happens to your soul when you die? And I think that was one of the questions that he asked, was what happens to your soul, or what's your perception of the soul?
Yeah.
And I think so one of the perceptions, and I've struggled with this, because this is one of those pieces of the Bible that I think there are fill in the blanks. Like, the Bible is an instruction manual. It says, here's these things you should do while you're here on earth. And then here's what you want to achieve. Here's how you want to go to heaven and get to heaven. But I think there are some places that are left to human perception. And so one of the things as I was looking at this, because I understand what my beliefs are, and it wasn't like I was just searching for stuff to complement my beliefs. But I found it interesting because I've always believed there's kind of two pieces, right? We have the spirit or the soul, which makes up our consciousness, our emotional, the pieces of us, who we are, our character, kind of the non-tangible things, if you will, of the human. And then you have the body, that's the vessel, right? That's made from earth. In fact, one of the things as I was doing the research, like, and Matt, you would know this, I'm sure, spirit comes from, the Hebrew word or the Greek word that is similar. The actual translation is breath of life. So when God breathed life into us, when he breathed spirit into human bodies that came from the ground, right? It was like joining those two pieces. And at one point, and I wish I would have written down the specific piece of scripture, the specific verse, but then it says, okay, so for example, like when the spirit leaves the body, you cease to be a living soul. When he breathes life into the body, then you are a living soul. So it's more of a description, more of an outline, rather than say, like, so you have spirit and you have body, and together it makes up that living soul that is us, the human, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, that kind of goes to 2 Corinthians 2, right? We're 2 Corinthians 5:8. I'm at 2 Corinthians as well, but we're talking.
Gotcha.
And 2 Corinthians chapter 5, I believe it is, verse 8, it says to be absent the body is to be present with the Lord, right? So it kind of goes into that. God breathes life into us, and then when we leave the body, we're leaving and we're with him, right? And I've heard people break it down, because people talk about body, mind, or body, spirit, and soul. Like I've had people say, what's the difference between like spirit and soul? And I've had it explained to me that like spirit is the mind, right? Your physical stuff is the body. So spirit is your thought, right? Because independent the flesh and blood, we have our brain produces thought and idea and creates, right? So I've had it explained to me, you got your physical body, you've got your spirit, which is your mind, and you've got your soul, which is what's eternal. The soul is that part of us that when it's absent, is always present with the Lord, right? So that's how I've heard it explained to me, which I think leads into the fun of the show. I don't know why I did that. That was a ghost, Han, but it didn't make sense without me going, ooh. So what's a ghost, right? Like, and here's now
spirit fingers. Spirit fingers.
Oh, those are spirit fingers, right? That's jazz hand spirit fingers. Okay, but so this is where it gets a little fun though, because I'm curious, Mike, where you're at on this. I love horror movies, especially supernatural ones. All right. Demon possessions, things like that. Right. And fun ones like Constantine, with, all these malevolent things. And then ones like The Conjuring. I really dig supernatural, scary stuff. People talk about ghosts often. Right. And one of the comments last week, which led us to this, was someone said, what about like your soul and like ghosts and stuff?
I think that was the exact comment.
Ghosts like that. Mike, what do you believe? Now, before we dig into like what's the Bible talk about, I'm curious, like, what do you think about ghosts? Do you think like, grandma can come back and play your favorite song when you're on your deathbed and it was grandma talking to you? What do you think about that stuff?
I think this is going to be kind of an answer without a direct answer. I think, well, here's why. And I want to come back to the question. One of the difficulties when you get into something like this that's maybe off page of the Bible, so to speak, is because people put Christianity in a box. They're like, well, this is the box you have to live in. I've been in that box. You've been in that box, right? And heaven forbid that I say something that somebody disagrees with or says, well, no, that's not right because.
Right. That's not
that's cool that you don't believe.
So
my perception, going back to answer your question directly, I think just us having a perception that there may be or that there are ghosts acknowledges that there is spiritual existence beyond our physical bodies. And so do I think, I was talking to my wife right before this, and I said, like even Matt was wanting to get into and talk about like purgatory, and that's not, respectfully, that's not necessarily really my jam. Like where purgatory, where it's kind of, well, I'm caught between heaven and hell, like that, and there's still something that's unfinished. And it's like, do I think that's possible? Yeah, I don't know. I mean, what if, and here's a big what if purgatory is that moment that you're caught between heaven and earth that is producing out-of-body experiences, that's producing near-death experiences for people? Because there are people that have had near-death experiences. I have not. But Swampy here said, hey, I had an out-of-body experience following a motor vehicle accident. There are people that die on the operating table. They die. Yeah. Physically, they are dead. There are no signs of life. Done. And then all of a sudden, 10 minutes later, 20 minutes later, whatever the time frame, I don't know the time frame, they end up, boom, all of a sudden they're back alive. And they're able to tell you things that took place while they were dead. So what if that moment, what if just that moment, like I think we often, when it comes to biblically, we look at like purgatory as this long lasting, like Roman Catholic, like you're stuck there, right? What if you're just stuck there for a split second? That's the purgatory. Like, am I going to go? Am I not going to go?
Like down the path of like, when you say like, it's like a second, like the whole, a day is like 1,000 years or 1,000 years, like a day to the Lord.
Right.
Dude, I mean, so it's funny that you bring that up because I was like digging into stuff and looking in, was it First Peter? I think where, yes, First Peter.
You said we weren't getting biblical yet. I got some biblical.
Well, we're sort of not yet. Well, it ties into purgatory because that's where when he's writing and he says that Jesus, is it First Peter? Doggone it, yeah. Verse 19, where it says he went and proclaimed God's salvation to earlier generations who ended up in the prison of judgment because they wouldn't listen. And this is what it ties into two things that I love right now. One is that the soul isn't just like this, scary ghost, like, or a blink or what, like this physically is telling us that Jesus went to the place where the souls went that weren't like taken up to God yet. Right.
Right.
And so it begs a lot of question of like, okay, what happens when you die? But it also brings me to my favorite thing, which is posthumous salvation. The dialogue of that, because the Bible talks about how every knee will bow, right? But we've talked about before, like age of accountability. And if somebody doesn't know God or nobody ever brought the gospel to them, or they were raised a Muslim their whole life and never heard the good news, would God truly hold that person accountable? We talked about being accountable only for what you know. But when you look at this, it shows an example that is worth asking the question, whether you agree with it or not. And I don't believe it's a heretical question.
Okay.
But if you have not come to give your life to Jesus and you die, is there a moment like this where Okay, because the Bible talks about you're blessed when you've seen, but you're even more blessed when you believe and you haven't seen. So say somebody they go their whole life saying, I haven't really seen something that made me believe, but they died. Do they get this moment like these people where Jesus reveals the truth to them and they go, oh, now I see.
Oh my goodness.
Because it says, for God so loved the world, he sent his only begotten son, right? So that whoever believes in him would be saved, right? But it doesn't say whoever believes in him before they die here. It doesn't say whoever believes in him in purgatory. There is no answer to that question. If we're honest, we're seeing an example here from Jesus of posthumous salvation, like post-death getting saved.
Right.
So when we talk about, are there ghosts? I think the answer is no and yes. And here's why I say that. Yes, we have a soul that goes somewhere, but biblically speaking, there's nothing to show that a ghost actually exists on earth. There's no biblical example of us dying and coming back as like a ghostly, put your hand through version of ourselves, except when Jesus returned and said, here you go, put your hand in my, in the hole, your finger in the hole, your hand in my side. He was offering that up. So it means it looked like he had a physical body, though it didn't say he was like an apparition. So there's no biblical backing that shows ghosts. But the question is, when you say ghost, do you really mean evil spirit?
That is, well, and I think that's where most people go. I think people go to that. That's easier to wrap people's heads around. So here's, while we're on some scripture, here's one of the things that I have always wrestled with also. As early as Genesis, and I was talking with a couple of young ladies that work with me, as early as Genesis 26 and 27, it says, and I had to write this down so that I didn't misquote it. Then God said, let us make human beings in our, and this is New Living Translation version. For those of you that are not familiar, that's my jam, right?
And what is this in Genesis what?
Genesis 1, 26, 27.
Okay.
Okay. He says, then God said, let us make human beings in our image to be like us. They'll reign over the fish in the sea, the birds in the sky, the livestock, all the wild animals on the earth, small animals that scurry along the ground. So God created human beings in his own image. In the image of God created male and female. He created them. The reason I'm going back here is because what if, okay, and people that have kids will understand this when we're talking about souls and spirit. What if, because oftentimes, like I have kids that we always assume like, oh, hey, our kids, we have kids that look like us. And so I think a lot of people read this, God created human beings in his likeness, in his image. Immediately in our heads, with our human perception, we go, oh, to look like him. What if it's more of like my daughter, for example, does not look exactly like my wife, but does behave exactly like my wife. She is created in my wife's image. Mm-hmm. So what if in Genesis, where it's talking about God created us in his image, it is the consciousness, it's the mentality,
spirit,
it's the spirit,
the intellect
of God,
of it all?
the intellect of it. And not necessarily the physical manifestation. Because like when we say, oh, that child is just like their dad, oh, they're just like their parent. Well, we're not always referring to something physical. And so I think that's one of the things to consider is like, my wife says, Emerson is an angel. She is an angel. I said, she's just like my wife. She's in my wife's image.
Brooke, he was just talking about how Emerson is exactly like you. And
yes.
And every bit of it he was saying was good.
So
Mike, here's the question in that, though, because then we know humans were created in God's image. Doesn't say that angels were, right? And we know that Lucifer, the choir director, took a third of the squad with him to be on the B team, the losing team, in the end of the story. But so here's the deal. Let's talk about stuff like The Conjuring, for example, right?
Well, wait. I want to because once you go down that path, we're not going to come back to this path. So I got to finish this thought, if you don't mind.
Okay, no, finish it.
So when we're talking about that, here's the other piece for spirit to be sort of everlasting is fast forward right to Jeremiah chapter 1 verse 5, where there's the comment that God says to Jeremiah, I knew you before I formed you in your mother's womb. Before you were born, I set apart and appointed you as my prophet to the nations. If he knew him before, it's because the soul is nonlinear. The soul is everlasting. So he's saying, I already knew this piece of you before you gained human form. So Seth, so that's why I'm saying when there are, like at the very beginning of this, when we're saying, hey, sometimes I don't know. I think there are pieces that if you look, and not to play pick a verse, that's not what I'm saying, Matt, but when you look at this, there are clues in the Bible outside of the standard biblical instruction manual that says, well, wait a minute, there is spirit, there is evidence of spirit, there is evidence of the living soul, there is evidence that there is something else that we came from and that we will return to. So that was my question. It's like, how did God know Jeremiah prior to physical existence?
He didn't have a soul, right? But that begs the question, I think, with what's happened in the world with how we've decided that a soul means a ghost, right? Like a soul, when people say souls, they tend to think of this like a ghost story, right? So Mike dies, his soul may choose to stay in the house. And it's like, well, that's not really how it works, right? I mean, biblically speaking, it's not really how it works. But I want to like dig in on, because when we talk about this, being created in God's image, things like that, and then movies like The Conjuring come out, okay? And I bring up The Conjuring because if you read about Ed and Lorraine Warren, they were commissioned by the Catholic Church to basically go handle supernatural stuff that the church didn't want their fingerprints on. Is kind of how they come about, okay? But they wrote a book called The Demonologist, and I read the book. It's fascinating. And they talked about the evil, or correction, they said the word malevolent spirits, right? Malevolent spirits, so evil spirits.
Right.
But it sounded to me more like they're referring to them like demons, like what we do see in the Bible, right? People getting possessed, people getting overtaken by stuff like that. And so I think we see a lot of scriptural evidence for scary things like demonic possession, which can manifest itself into feeling like a haunted house, things like that. And the way that Ed and Lorraine Warren talked about it, where these malevolent spirits could take on, like, you know, they could make you think you were seeing this dead relative, right? They know how to play on your emotions, things like that. And so when we talk about that stuff, I think a lot of times when we talk about the supernatural existence of our soul, right? To get someone to go, okay, well, you believe you've got a soul supernatural that leaves your body, goes somewhere.
Sure. It's
not hard to understand why people think, oh, then that could be a ghost, right? Like I had a friend tell a story. I think their mother was passing or something. And their grandmother had already passed. And the grandma had this song that she played with the mom, right? That was like their favorite song.
Right.
And as she was in there saying goodbye to her mom, all of a sudden this song pops on the radio that was like 30 years old and wouldn't play normally. And she's like, I knew that was my grandmother playing that song. And it's like, whew, like, what do you say to that? Like, because I can't deny the experience that someone had in that moment. It happened to them. Okay. But I wouldn't die on the hill of going, I'm sure that was grandma. But also when we read stuff like in 1 Peter that talks about Jesus going and preaching to spirits in prison, those who disobeyed God long ago, when God waited patiently while Noah was building his boat. I mean, that clearly says the people that got drowned because they weren't on the boat with Noah. So their souls went to prison, which is where we get purgatory things.
Purgatory.
Like so Jesus went and spoke to these people. So it's like, there's nothing biblically that talks about like these people can break out of jail and go back and haunt you. So anything biblical would seem as though it's a demon, part of the losers that, you know, got thrown down from the sky in the mistake fight that they made. But I don't believe that there are ghosts in the sense of the ghost being someone's soul left behind. But I do believe, yes, there are malevolent spirits. I think the Bible even shows us that. And so if you're using the word ghost synonymously with demon, then I could say, sure, I believe in ghosts.
But so then let me ask you a question. Where does, you know, when we're talking about purgatory, where do those malevolent spirits come from? If someone's watching this, how are they produced?
So that's a good question. I think, the inference I think that we draw is that they're demons, right? That they're, which I think when we say demon, we're referring to them as a fallen angel, right? Like, but so I don't think I've ever told you this. So this is going to make. Here you go. Y'all want to hear something
dun, dun.
Supernaturally cool? Well, yeah. So here's the thing. So there are a couple of things that supernaturally that I've gotten the joy to experience. One, my friend getting healed from cancer, and boom, 30 days later, a guy that's in stage 4 planning his death is cancer free. Beautiful. The other thing that happens in my life is I don't ever really remember what I dream, but when I have dreams that are like not weirdly spatial, supernatural, but like everyday dreams that if it's not good, sometimes it hasn't happened yet. And then I started writing them down now because it happens way too often where something happens and then I
like hopes and dreams or like premonitions?
No, like having a dream and then that thing happens.
So like a premonition.
Yeah, right. And I've just written it off. It's like, oh, this was a sucky dream. And then a few weeks later, I'm like, why do I feel like this happened? Oh, because it did. Right. Interestingly, though, those were never good when it was good things. They were always very clear and they were always very not good times. And then it comes and it's like this law of attraction. We'll call it that. Right.
Sure.
I had never in 44 years of my life, never felt like I saw an angel, never had that moment where, the old man sat down to you next to you at the burger joint and gave you a piece of advice. And then you turn around and he's not there. Like I never had those kind of.
That guy here 20 years ago.
But less than a year ago, probably about 6 or 7 months ago, I did have an experience that was very not pleasant. I was walking downstairs at night. For a couple days in a row, I kept waking up at roughly 3-ish in the morning. Just was waking up, whatever, and had to go to the bathroom. So the way our house is laid out, our bedroom's upstairs. So I had to go down the stairs to go to the bathroom. I'm coming down the stairs, and we have a window at the end of the stairs, and then you can see it at the street. And as I get down the stairs, I look out the window and I see a lady standing in the road. Oh, this is getting me already creeped out. Ugh. I see a lady standing in the road, I don't know, 100 feet away, 150 feet away. And I'm like, that is so weird. Like she's in her house coat. And my first thought, I was like, oh my gosh, just like probably some Alzheimer's lady, kind of walked out. And I'm like, oh gosh, this is weird. And then it was like all of a sudden, I could see her face very clearly. And she was way too far to see her face very clearly. But it was a look of hatred, like frightening, evil hatred. And I'm like, oh, this is weird. And then I noticed something else about her. Her hair that was all messed up wasn't all messed up. It was messed up because it was just almost like in water floating. Now, for those of you that just jumped in, you're like, oh, was this some weird dream he had?
Welcome.
No, for 3 days, getting up at the same time, but just whatever to go to the bathroom. And this night I look out and then there's this lady standing on the road. And her hair is just kind of looking all fried, but it's like slowly moving, like if when you see underwater movies, whatever. Right. And she just had this look of hatred and was just kind of there, and didn't move, just staring right at the house. And it was just immediately. The hairs are standing up my arm right now. I was telling you guys about it. It's so freaking weird. Hair stood up on my arms, got goosebumps like crazy. Just almost couldn't breathe. Like I was frightening, and then I was like, you can't come in this house. Like this house is protected by prayer. Like whatever this is can't come in. And right. it was almost like, and I wish I could actually put it to words, but I could feel the hatred and it couldn't come in and it almost like amplified that. And I got to tell you, I'm like, is this a dream? Right. Cause I'm standing on the stairs. I'm like, I've been waking up. And it wasn't like I couldn't go back to sleep. I went to the bathroom. I came back around the stairs, and I like went to go up, and I was like, I didn't want to look back because I like didn't want to give power to anything, right? Like right. Ed and it's interesting. And Ed and Lorraine Warren, the folks at the Conjuring movies were made about. Those were based on true stories, and they talked about like you don't acknowledge an evil spirit, you don't give it your attention because that's opening that up. And I'm like, well, I feel like our home is is covered with prayer, and I don't think anything malevolent can come in. But I got to tell you, Mike, that was the first time in my life, and the funny part was that experience didn't happen until after I had made a dramatic shift in my life where I truly was like, man, I've really got to spend time in the Word. I've really got to be the man of God that Dara deserves. And it's like when I consciously made the change to be like, I'm going to invest my life back in Jesus again and in His Word. It was kind of like when that shift happened in my life, and it's really like turned that corner. It wasn't until after that this happened, and I'm like, it was a scary experience, dude. And so now when people tell me about those moments or these weird things that happened to them, I'm a lot more susceptible. I'm a lot less skeptical than I was in the past. And
right.
I don't know why it took 45 years to scare the crap out of me, but Dara and I read a good book that I recommend everybody called The Veil, Veil, and it talks about what the Bible says, right? We could be entertaining angels unaware. There's spiritual warfare happening. And this book describes that there's a veil that you can see through at times, and that often you wouldn't want to.
So, no, that's like, as you're telling that, I get goosebumps because it's crazy.
Dude, it was so scary.
So the interesting thing, though, I've not read The Veil. One of the things that was interesting, and also my wife and I were talking about, and I've studied other, somewhat studied other religions and the basis as well. And one of the conversations that her and I were just having recently is, okay, so, and like you and I are talking, okay, whether it's spirit, the soul, angels and demons, and if there is spiritual warfare going on, and I think there are certain people that get attuned at times to be able to see that. They're able to see beyond that veil, so to speak, as you're talking. So just using terminology you're just now bringing up. So the interesting thing, if you look at, for example, like Hinduism, right? And it talks about the 7 chakras, right? And ancient, what was it? Plato was a Greek philosopher, right? And he talks about how the soul's broken into 3 pieces, right? The mind, the heart, and then like the sacral chakra or whatnot. And so one of the interesting things, like if you look into, and this is one of the places I think that the Bible leaves some opening, some space in a conversation like this, is because, so like you look at, okay, we have 7 chakras. Well, the 7th chakra, right, is up here, right? I think it's the white chakra, and forgive me, I don't recall.
I'm not that sure.
I don't remember the specific naming, but one of the theories, for example, like in Hinduism and Buddhism, is that there are multiple Buddhas. And so they acknowledge Jesus's existence, and one of their religion's theories is that then Jesus was maybe a Buddha or a messenger. And part of the reason that people could see that light and that halo is because he was so attuned to that sort of supernatural or that spirit world, that veil. So
that's what that guy was talking about in the book, The Veil, dude. He said when he was a kid, he didn't realize nobody else could see what he saw. So like he would tell his parents, like, hey, do you see that, that thing crawling down that person? And his parents like, oh yeah, oh scary, like just playing along. And he goes, it wasn't until he, started telling people what he saw when he started getting like closer to his teens, and people looked at him like he had a third eyeball, and that he realized, wait a minute,
maybe he did have a third eye.
All these monsters that I'm seeing, not everybody can see them. And in his book, he literally talks about how to be able to, see through the veil. And Dara and I spoke about it, and I said, man, I don't want that. Like you were saying earlier, I don't want the gift of prophecy. Or no, Andy Buck was saying that to me earlier. We were talking. He's like, I don't want the gift of prophecy. It says if they're wrong, you're supposed to stone them to death. Right. He's like, don't make me a prophet. So I don't know, dude. This kind of stuff, it's scary to me.
It's a hard conversation, and it's hard to me because I am a Christian through and through, and I believe what the Bible teaches us. I've also, as I've studied other pieces of religion, there's some unique things that it's like, well, there's crossover there. Mm-hmm. They all believe there's a soul. Well, what if, and they're saying, well, no, Jesus was this attuned messenger. And so that's what, and again, I believe differently than that, yes. But it is interesting to say, okay, well, if somebody gets attuned, or like you were saying, oh, they looked at him like he had a third eye. Well, that's one of the pieces too, when we're talking about the soul traveling, if it's non-linear, and it's one of those. I lost my train of thought now, because I just, all of it is so intriguing to me. And it is hard, because it's like for somebody to tune in and look for me to a direct answer, you to a direct answer. It's like all we can do is use the pieces that are spelled out in the Bible for us, look at some of the other pieces of history, maybe include and look at some of the other religions, because there are pieces of history there, but there's so much crossover in certain areas that it's like, well, what if that piece of that one religion over here, I gotta get it on camera, what if that is the missing piece that they didn't spell out here? There's this one missing page of the Bible, because there is time and space and gaps in there that I've never.
It's 400 years of silence too.
Right. I mean, so you go through this and it's like, well, what? So how do we determine where the spirit meets the soul? Are they one and the same? Are they different? Where, as you're talking about, how do you see through the veil? What is I think Seth said this earlier, which I thought was a really good comment. He says, what if we perceived our reality as secondary with the spiritual realm as primary?
Well, Elon Musk, actually, I'm so glad Seth said that. Man, that is a tongue
twister. Say that 5 times fast. Seth said that. Seth said that.
I sound like Mike Tyson. Mike, don't get mad. No, but Elon Musk talks about that. He said, like, we're living in a simulation, right? Like that this isn't the real thing. Like kind of like the Matrix. And it's interesting because Andy, I hope Josh is okay with me sharing this. Andy said his son said something very profound, and I thought it was cool. He said, what if in Revelation, as John was painting the picture of the future, what if what he was seeing was the stuff that's being created in VR? Because like people now they'd rather go live in their virtual space and they aren't in this world, right? And he was like, what if the things John was seeing in his revelation, these beasts coming out and all that, was really like what virtual reality? That's where people were. It was the hell they were putting themselves in. It was like, man, like so many more people are talking about what if this is the simulation, like Seth said, like
right.
Josh said. I don't know, but here's what I do feel like the Bible does show us that I feel confident in saying I believe this. I confidently believe the Bible shows us that there are malevolent spirits that attack people, demons, evil. Okay, we see it casting out of. I think the Bible clearly tells us that when a person's physical body dies, their soul leaves. It says, absent the bodies to be present with the Lord, right? There is nothing biblical that would support even drawing an inference that a person would stay and haunt people. So I think what we see biblically is that, yes, there are spirits that are evil. The Bible doesn't talk about, other than the Holy Spirit, it doesn't. I don't see anything in the Bible that would like substantiate an argument for, good spirits hanging out. But the Bible does tell us we could be entertaining angels unaware. Angels aren't exactly spirits. They're physical beings created by God. It sounds like on the other side of the veil, so we don't get to see them. Right. But the only spirits, it seems, the Bible talks about are evil ones. So I think we can say, when we said, do you believe in ghosts? Does the Bible say there are ghosts? The Bible does say there are ghosts. If you're saying, does the Bible say there's evil spirits? Because yes, there's those.
Well, but so tying in with, I gotta look this up. And this is a good comment. Another good comment by Seth. He says, all competing, in quotes, all competing religions are going to resemble the truth because they're all alternate counterfeits.
That's strong.
I think that is a strong statement, Seth, and I appreciate you sharing it, because I think you're right. That's why I think there are similarities, because there are other religions trying to create or copy what is the truth. It's like running a copy machine, back in the day, if before you had a scanner and we're printing stuff out, right? You put a copy in. So here's religion. We're going to put the copy in, and you burn that copy 100 times. You'll have something that resembles that original copy, but it'll be distorted, and so you'll be able to pick up, well, hey, maybe there's this piece that I didn't see on the copy before because the image changes. So I think that's sort of what he's saying there.
I feel like that's a pretty good way to explain it. I mean, at the end of the day, a lot of religions are similar, but it also goes back to, and I'll say it this way, a lie is always a good lie because it's got some truth in it. Right.
Right.
The lies that take forever to find out that they were happening was because there was just enough truth in it to make it believable. And I think that goes with a lot of well, you know what? I think it goes with all religion, because I don't believe being a follower of Jesus is a religion. I think it's a way of life. I think it's a way of life of choosing to live a life the way that a perfect man lived his. And right. We're learning. I don't like the word religion because a religion implies a lot of man-made things that say you have to follow A, B, C, and D. And in the Old Testament, God gave us what we asked for, and he gave us, you have to do A, B, C, and D's, right? Well, it was a list of don't do's and do's, right? About people. Right. But Jesus made it even more simple for us. Not only did he come and take the beating and take the sin and take that death away for us, but he also broke all 10 down into one sentence when he said, or two sentences, when he was asked what the most important commandment was, right? First, love God with all and this is where heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love others as yourself, right? So he made it so easy for us. You look at stuff like, I heard on Pastor's Perspective the other day, they were talking about the Muslim faith, for example, right? Mm-hmm. And the Quran has there are a lot of similar tenets as what we see in the Bible. Right. But if you look at who Muhammad was, and you go, okay, he was a man that was supposedly so illiterate he couldn't read and he couldn't write, and he was in a cave, and his followers are drinking camel urine while he's walking around covered in camel semen and all this other weird stuff, and you're going, you find that easy to latch onto and believe, but you have a hard time believing God loved you enough as his creation that he came down and died to save you? Right. It's easier to believe the guy covered you. And the second question is, why would you choose to believe the guy covered in camel semen drinking camel urine? Like, what about that makes it a logical thing to believe in, right? So as people are jumping in, they're like, wait a minute, I thought this was our ghosts real. It is, but I think it goes back to going, if we're going to reference scripture and say scripture shows that there are evil spirits, but it doesn't show ghosts, like people coming back from the dead to hang out, we have to also say what makes the Bible authoritative. And I think when you look at the Bible, you see a love story from beginning to end. And some people go, well, I don't see that here and I don't see it there. But if you look at it as a whole picture, you start to see why thing A and thing B happened and how that story comes together. So I think an important thing for people to know, though, is if we go, are ghosts real? Why would you want to know that? Well, because I want to know if I'm going to end up with a haunted house, or if grandma's going to come back to visit because she loved me and missed me, and died before she could go to my band concert. I think we have to acknowledge this, though, because the Bible does show that there are evil spirits. One would have to question, and this is where we have to go, I don't know, but how did the evil spirit get in, right? How was it invited in? How did it manifest? Things like that. I think we have to be aware that when we talk about ghosts and evil spirits and things like that and demonic spirits in the Bible, we have to acknowledge that that's not something ever to play with. You don't want to ask, hey, if there's a demon, show it to me. I think biblically, the lessons we're learning is we want to be as far as possible from those evil spirits. Seth commented, he said, however, evil spirits all come from fallen angels, therefore spirits and angels are the same. Additionally, we're warned that if man or angels come with different gospel, then they are not of God. We are warned about that.
Absolutely.
So that's the thing. When we infer this, we say, look, they're evil spirits. We know that, a third of heaven's army decided to play for the bad team. But the other thing is we got to acknowledge, knowing that's real, don't play with it.
Well, here's, as you're talking about that, and you're talking about ghosts and our spirit, are ghosts real? And I agree with you, not in the sense that people think, not in the sense that Hollywood shows us. That's one of the things to consider. Like Hollywood's trying to entertain people, but it puts that thought in our head. And so, again, mass media and pop culture says, oh, well, here's what we have is going back to one of the original pieces of scripture I shared at the beginning is in Genesis, if we're created in God's image, then no, we that are containing spirit are not evil ghosts. Like Seth said, it's evil spirits come from fallen angels. So, that was one of the things that I started to bring up and I got sidetracked on was Plato when he was talking about what is the soul, and he was trying to break it down in parts. One of the pieces, and I don't know how to say this, but he says thymoides is thought of the heart part, and so that's the piece of the soul that is striving or moving towards good. And again, that was from a man's word, right? Or a man's perception, a philosophical view that it's like, well, if we are that piece of spirit, if that's our piece of soul that's always moving towards good, then no, there are not ghosts in the Hollywood sense, if that makes sense. The other thing kind of tied in with this, because when Neil asked that specifically last week, and I was thinking about, okay, how do we explain the spirit and soul? And so this is kind of parallel. One of the thoughts, and I heard this, I heard a similar comparison from a rabbi years ago on YouTube. I don't remember his name, but I remember the video. And it's the comment was, well, what if our bodies, our physical bodies, and I showed this a little at the beginning, is the vessel, right? That's what carries our soul. And if the spirit and soul are one when we're here, so it's like a discussion. We're all sitting here on computers, right? We're all sitting on these digital items. So I'm going to feel like I'm going to get off base, but I promise I'll come back around. So if the computer is the box, right? And it's plugged in, and when you unplug the PC or the Mac, whatever you're on, when you unplug it at some point, right, the electricity is gone. And so if the computer said to the electricity, well, where do you go when I get unplugged? What happens when you unplug me? And the electricity is like, what do you mean, where do I go? I'm always there. I was there before you were. Computers are a new invention, right? Humans are a new invention, right? And so if computers are a recent invention, I've always been there. I'm everywhere. And so the computer is the box, but it requires electricity to function over time. So if we're looking at it, that me as a human, I'm the box, right? I require that soul to function. And so when we get unplugged or when we die, so to speak, and I'm just talking modern analogies, so to speak, if we're the box that contains that, like, then you'd say, well, where does the soul come from, right? It's always been there. It's always, we just got to get plugged in. Hence, God has to breathe life into us by giving us that spirit. So again, that's why, like, we as humans are I mean, I know in the Bible it says, that our nature can be not good and so forth.
It's deceitful above all things.
Right.
Yeah.
But ultimately, that spirit and that soul, if we're striving to get to a better place, right? If we're striving to go to heaven when this is all done with, when we get unplugged from the PC, right? if that's the direction, then the soul in the non-traditional sense is good. Yeah. I think we as humans are good.
Well, and that dude, and that makes me wrestle with, and I love Seth. Seth, thank you for coming on the show and your comments. And I love that you said my phone goes in the freezer when I don't want it to communicate. Dude, I loved your analogy about the computer and electricity. And I think that what you just said about our souls striving for something good, that goes back to like what we were looking at earlier in in 1 Peter 4, like where we see him saying, of course your former friends are surprised when you no longer plunge into the flood of wild and destructive things they do, so they slander you. But remember that they will have to face God, who stands ready to judge everyone, both the living and the dead. And then this is a powerful verse. That's why the good news was preached to those who are now dead. So although they were destined to die like all people, they now live forever with God in spirit. Let me say that again, because this last sentence is so strong. That is why the good news was preached to those who are now dead. So although they were destined to die like all people, They now live forever with God in the Spirit. This will tick off a few Christians, but there are multiple times where we hear about Jesus preaching the gospel to people that have already been dead. And this example, when you read this, you say, huh. Now, some will go, well, no, what he's saying is when they were alive, that's why it was preached to them, but now they're dead. And they're but when you see Jesus going to purgatory and preaching, we know that the soul does go somewhere, and that God's rescue, and this ties back to what you said, that his mission the whole time is to bring us to the good direction. So much so that Jesus, even after people were dead, when he went down into purgatory, he converted them to realize, God is so good. No, not that we have, Seth, he said, don't want to be disagreeable, but I don't believe we're all at all inherently good, but born sinners needing a savior. That's a whole nother show to really dig in deep on. Because
I think he's talking about, when I was talking about the soul, like, I think we're trying to move towards that consistently. That's where we're trying to move towards.
That's what we were created to move towards,
right?
Is what you're saying. And what Seth's saying, because we're sinners, we don't move toward it.
That is another show.
And that's what it is. But I guess that goes right back to, though, with what you said, with our soul being wired to move toward God. Whether the wiring's faulty or not is a whole nother show. But God created us and wired us to be drawn to him. And so much so was his rescue mission for us so powerful that even after death, we see Jesus going and helping people see what they missed so they can have life. And that's a whole other show too, posthumous.
And using the computer analogy and going back to early on in the show when we were talking near-death experiences, if it's Jesus preaching to bring them closer, what if that's the near-death experience? They're like, no, he just now found me, plug him back in. Boom! There he goes.
Yeah,
that's a whole different analogy, right?
I do love it, though. I do love it. Well, and we didn't even get, because we got to wrap the show, but we didn't even get to, like, okay, let's talk about those demons that do come possess people. You know, when Jesus sent people out, what did he send them out to do? He said, go out there, preach the gospel, heal the sick, and cast out demons.
Cast out demons.
And that's happening today. And he didn't say, hey, get the priests to cast out the demons. I mean, he was talking to his followers to say,
absolutely,
I've empowered you to go heal, and I've empowered you to cast out demons. And we've got to say goodbye, so we don't get to talk about what casting out demons is.
Well, and with that, so we've got a couple other good shows. We really look forward to, for everybody that's watching, thank you so much. We appreciate your time, and we value you, and we just want to make an impact, and we want to share our faith with you and help spread faith to others. So I think that's the whole message.
Caboodle, if you will.
What's that?
The whole kit and caboodle.
The whole kit and caboodle. And with that, for everybody that's tuned in, again, please, if you're getting something out of this show, share it with a friend, share it on your Facebook, share it in your YouTube. Make sure you subscribe and click the button so that you get notified when we go live. And with that, we will see you back here next week, same time, for more Friday Night Fire. Yeah.
Don't forget this. If you don't know who Jesus is, if you think it's all malarkey, as the pretend president says, it's a bunch of malarkey. I'm going to say this. Come on, man. Listen, just open the Bible and check out who Jesus is. Read about him. The most direct book you can read is the book of Mark. It is pretty short and to the point.
Absolutely.
But open the book of Mark and read who Jesus was. Read the way that he wanted you to live. I firmly believe that if you've got questions, he's got answers. Not to sound like a commercial, so don't want to end the show without encouraging you. Go open up a Bible, read the Gospel of Mark, learn about Jesus, and then you decide for yourself if that's somebody worth following. I think if you do, Mike, and I think if you do, you'll want to follow him. Jesus.
Absolutely. One thing I found time and time again is oftentimes when people don't know Jesus, it's simply because they don't know Jesus. They haven't taken the time to read the Bible. They haven't had a conversation with somebody that is convicted, that says, hey, this is what happened. This is why. And so, at least from my experience, oftentimes, because then when people start to get into that, I think you absolutely spot on, Matt. I think that's awesome.
And if you need some prayer, if you want to talk, if you got questions, reach out to Mike, reach out to me. Just reach out to one of us. We'd be happy to chat with you. We'd be more than happy to listen and hopefully try and answer some questions and point you to some good resources. So don't feel like you're out there on an island trying to figure. You don't have to figure this all out on your own. Reach out to somebody else who says, "Hey, man, I'm trying to follow Jesus," and just go along for the journey with them.
100%. With that, you guys have a great weekend, and we'll see you back here next week for more Friday Night Fire.
Seth, you rock in our book too.